welcome back to Sarah Abbott Life Coaching. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but I have been praying and thinking about some new things, and we're going to do a new fun thing on the channel. So today we are going to start our first interview in an interview series with my friend Julie, who is actually my friend's friend, but I consider her my friend now. And as you guys know, with my life coaching, the first part of life change, in my opinion, is owning your story. And mostly we do that with my clients through the Enneagram. But I just thought, and actually, God told me that it would be really cool to just have people come on here and share their story. So I'm so happy to introduce you to Julie Ratiani. And Julie, welcome to the
Hello.
show. I don't know. Channel. Welcome to the channel. And would you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. So my name's Julie, and yes, Sarah is a friend of a friend, but now we're new friends. And we share that we are adoptive families. So I'm a mom to 2 kids, and we have been involved in foster care and adoption here for about 6 years. And that has been our driving force in this season of our life. We've really enjoyed it. And you mentioned the Enneagram. I am self-described, and my family well knows, as a life experience enthusiast. So I love to experience it all, the good and the bad. And I love to hear other people's stories too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you say it out loud, you name something and you can take it out of chaos. And just being able to have somebody else hear it and say it out loud. So I've enjoyed thinking about, what is my story? What am I going to share? And it brings, that fear and shame that you can feel in isolation is just gone when you're able to say it. So hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. Okay, I'm going to grab my coffee. Do you have any coffee?
I have already had it.
I have too, but I drink a whole pot a day because I'm an Enneagram 8. And then sometimes I still drink more. So anyway, I'll just keep getting more and more hyper while we're talking. It'll be so great.
That is great. You can
All right.
away. Yes.
Julie, tell me your story.
So, okay, you mentioned that you work with the Enneagram with people.
Yes.
So I thought I would start there, that I am an Enneagram 7.
Yay.
Mm-hmm. What are you again?
I'm an 8.
You're an 8.
I'm just like an 8 with a capital E.
All right.
Yeah.
Big time 8.
Big time 8. Yeah, that's right.
So I am a 7, which is described as the enthusiast. So that is fitting too. And I am just disgustingly optimistic, even in difficult times. I can be a cheerleader for myself and people around me. I just wake up perky, ready to go. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes to hear that.
Don't need a whole pot of coffee to be perky.
I enjoy it, but I don't need it. And I can really find the silver lining in most experiences. I can say that's really hard, but there is this one good thing, which people can need, and sometimes you really don't need that. So that definitely describes me and kind of how I navigate my world. Richard Rohr says about 7s that they try to imagine a life where there's no Good Friday and it's always Easter. So it's like a big thing to avoid pain, and so 7s seek out like good experiences and fun things and planning and anticipating things, and just have these rose-colored glasses in all circumstances. And that's fitting for me. So this is how.
Do you follow Bob Goff?
A little bit.
Okay. So before I understood the Enneagram, I could not stand Bob Goff because I was like, I read his book and I wanted to like it, but I was like, he has like a parade with balloons and it just irritated me. Like, as an 8, authenticity is like really, really important to me. And so when people won't tell me like what's wrong, I'm like, oh, I don't even have time, you know? And then when I understood the Enneagram, now I love Bob Goff because I'm like, this is just what he brings to the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's beautiful. And so the Enneagram has helped me give a lot of grace to humanity. It's good.
Understanding what different people value and why. And yes.
And what we all have to contribute to the world. You know what I mean? We all have our strengths and weaknesses for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that served me very well through my life. And I think because of that, though, I lacked a lot of self-awareness throughout my life. Like as a kid and a teenager, if I had a headache, I could never figure out why. It wasn't like, well, you haven't had water or a good meal today. It was just like, I have no idea, but I have a headache. Or if I get car sick, it's like, why do I not feel good? It's like, oh, we were reading in the car. And it's just, I would never think about my discomfort or pain. It was like, I don't know where it came from. And my sister, she could always like put a finger on what she was feeling in her body and why and what it was, what she ate or how this always happens. And I didn't realize until I was an adult that this is how normal people are when they are aware of what they're feeling. And I just was just always just positive thinking, like it's going to be okay. And
number? Sorry.
What was that?
Do you know her number?
My sister is a 9.
9. So just so you know, so you can give yourself more grace, because she's in the body type.
So there you go.
The body type. Body type people know, we know exactly what's going on our body. Yeah. And so that's a little bit of an advantage there.
Okay. I will give myself that forgiveness. Yeah. So, yeah. And another thing that kind of just describes my paradigm in loving life experiences. When I was in college, I was driving home from school and my car broke down outside of Chico in the middle of like 100-degree day. And I'm just in these almond orchards. And I called my dad and I was almost giddy with excitement. Like, my car is broken down on the side of the road. This is like a life experience that people always talk about. What am I going to do? How am I going to solve this? How am I going to get out of this? It's like something you see in movies, someone's stranded on the road. But I was thrilled. And that's when I started going, I am not normal. Why am I? Because it's the good experiences, but even difficult experiences just provide such a thrill for me. Wow. And a story to tell, I think.
Good.
So anyways, that was just an example of how I handle difficult things too. It's like, there's going to be a lesson from this, or I'm going to have a good story to tell. I'm going to learn something. And so that was sort of the value that I found in pain. So fast forward into kind of this current season of my life. Several years ago, my husband and I decided we were ready to start a family, and we found ourselves dealing with infertility and for quite a while, struggling through that. And, that was its own part of the process. But then we decided to grow our family through adoption and became excited about that, and decided that, we were going to become foster parents and pursue adoption through foster care. And so over the past...
I ask you a few questions.
I would love for you to. Yes.
Sorry. Okay. I'm curious, as a fellow woman who has traveled the road of infertility, yes, were you able to reframe that and make it like a great experience?
Totally.
Really?
Yes. I
dang, girl.
That's what I do, find that positive thing. I think in the beginning, and it's different now in hindsight, but it was sort of this good thing that we could do for the world, and finding how God can, that verse that he sets the lonely in families. And so really feeling our desire to be parents met with the need that children have to be in a safe home. And so I think back then I felt like a calling to this, and purposed for it. And I think it was like a gradual mourning of our experience with infertility and that disappointment, but became really excited about the cause, I think, of adoption. What about you?
So I look back now and I realize I handled it like a Super 8. We only tried for like 6 months. And then I had always had really debilitating cramps. Like I just knew something was wrong, because who could be in this much pain every month? Like it didn't seem normal. And so we jumped right to infertility doctor, and we found out we were both infertile.
Wow.
So I did take that like immediately in the doctor's office. I was like, okay, God's up to something here. Like, how can you both be infertile? Like the doctor's like, that's really rare.
Yeah.
And in addition, I had actually always wanted to adopt. Like one of my first memories is just like wanting to be an adoptive mom, which is so strange. So I immediately was like, this is what God wants for us. It didn't take away from the sadness though. Like, even now, I mean, I'm 43, and honestly, so many people in my life have had accidental pregnancies, that not having a uterus anymore is like actually the best thing about my life. Like my husband and I joke, we're like, who knew we'd end up being so amazing and never having to worry about an accidental pregnancy? But
yeah.
But even now, like you go to baby showers and everyone inevitably starts talking about the birth and the breastfeeding. And I just, even now, am like, wow, like I am just not like almost 99.9% of women, like that's still painful.
It stays with you.
And amazing. So it's weird. I don't know. I went into like a really deep depression and pursued adoption, but like two really intense paths through that at the same time. It was really wild.
Yeah, I get it. No, I felt that too. And I like wanted to find people who were like me so that I could find that same experience, but it's so different. Even with adoptive families, everybody has a different story and a different experience. So yeah, it's not like a traditional pregnancy.
That's right.
Yeah. But we were able, so we started foster care and became resource parents. And we initially did emergency care placements. So that's where you are able to welcome a child into your home, like without much advance notice, and be a home that could possibly adopt. So we had our home study, we were certified, ready to adopt, but also support reunification with the biological family if that was a viable option. So it's two things at once. You're saying we're willing to adopt this child and we're willing to help reunify them and kind of mend that relationship with the biological family if possible.
How did you choose that? That sounds so hard.
There's a whole variety of reasons, but we wanted to begin with younger kids. And so if you provide emergency foster care it's often going to be younger kids who have not been in foster care already for a while. And by a measure of grace, we were able to adopt the first child that we took care of. And so it didn't really shake my worldview very much, because it was like, well, this was what our plan was, and it happened. And it had its own difficulties, but it kind of worked out. And so then we had 3 other kids in our home after that ended up going in different directions and did not become part of our forever family. And the fourth child that we cared for, we actually was a newborn and was placed with us just a few days before the Tubbs fire. So we were evacuated for a time with a newborn, first newborn I had ever cared for. And that was a very difficult time. But kind of to your question earlier, having this newborn really fulfilled and awakened a lot of these desires that I had had about being a mother since I was a little girl playing with dolls. And I just treasured all of those things that that I had been mourning about not being able to get pregnant. And I felt that in this little infant and caring for her, and it satisfied so much of that. And after about a year with her, we were able to reunify her with her birth mother. And it was so beautiful. Here's all the positives. Just amazing to participate in it. And I would tell people, like, this was just a picture of this big family in the kingdom of God and what it looks like to be reconciled and the second chance in things. And we were welcomed into their family. They're like, well, you're part of our family forever now. And we stay in touch and we text each other, and it's just really awesome to participate in it. And it also just broke my heart, that I had cared for this little baby for so long. And I had both of those emotions. And I think that's what every adoptive parent knows, is that there is joy and sorrow at the same time. And you have to be able to feel both of those things. And so I started struggling with how to carry those both, not in differing degrees or on different days, but at the same time. How do you feel both joy, for this child and her future and staying with her family of origin, and acknowledging the cost to myself and to our family. So we waited a little while after that to kind of regroup as a family. And
sorry, I have this burning question.
Let's hear it.
Going back 1 minute. So I know sevens they struggle with grieving. So I want to know how you did it. Like, for anyone who might be listening who's a 7 who wants to avoid pain first and foremost.
Yeah.
Like, did you have a choice? Did it just take you over, or did you have a choice? Does that make sense?
I feel like I'm going to proceed in the story and you will see how
awesome.
I grieved.
Great.
I thought I had, I thought that I had grieved it. And, as resource parents, we go to trainings on attachment, and we go to trainings on trauma and all kinds of parenting, and read all the books. And so I have knowledge about what to do.
Yeah. And
I have information, but that's different than really dealing with your grief. And I think that's how my husband and I are. We're like, give us information so we can know what to do. And that's different than real vulnerability. So
his number.
He's a 5.
Okay. So you're both in the head triad. So you're going to process things right with your thoughts.
Yes.
Until your body or feelings make you do something else.
Ding, ding. So, okay. So we had that really difficult time with our newborn, and we waited a little bit and we got back into it. We had one child and we wanted to continue to grow a family. So we took another placement, and I would say it was about a week, but I didn't admit it, maybe 2 weeks. And I was like, something is really wrong, not with our child, with me. And you know, by this point, we've had 5 kids that we have cared for. And so I just enter right back into this mode of, you know, you're holding the child on your shoulder and you're bouncing without even thinking, you know, and you're burping and you're singing lullabies and the bedtime routine. It all just comes back to you and you just do it without even thinking. And all of those just like instinctual things that you do that I was doing as a mother without thinking were my body was raising red flags within me. I'm trying to figure out a way to describe this. Like in my house and in those emotions, my body had memories of all of these kids that I have cared for. And
The body keeps the score.
Have you read that book? Yes, immensely helpful for me. And I bought that book and started reading it like right away. But the main thing that my body did for me, I was holding our new daughter before bed, and I just put her up on my shoulder like I always do. And my body couldn't do it. It was just like, you can't, you know, and I'm like, in my mind, like, here's how we build attachment and here's how we make her feel safe in our home. And I couldn't. I had to hold her in a different position. Wow. I couldn't sing, you know, a bedtime song. I couldn't. And I was like, my body is just refusing. Like it's saying, you cannot keep doing this, you know, in self-preservation because of the loss that I had felt in each child that had come into our home and had then moved on. And that was trauma. That was trauma in my body. And as a parent, I had approached trauma for so long as something that I was here to care for, that in my children. My children are going to come with trauma, and I'm going to empathize and understand it in them. And in this process of adopting, I was carrying my own trauma and just putting it aside, you know, to be the mom who takes care of the kids. And I'm relieved that it's amazing what our body can do, you know, that it was something physical within me that said, you have to do something. It wasn't just a thought process. And I could not have enough optimism. I couldn't pray enough and have faith that this would change. You know, I couldn't do enough self-care. I had to face the music. You know, I have unresolved grief and trauma, and it's keeping me from attaching with my child. So that was how I realized I had not dealt with the grief specifically of that newborn that had been with us, but of all the kids that had, you know, gone different ways, and I had failed expectations, and I had nurtured and cared for, and it was this position of holding a baby on my shoulder, you know, where I carried that pain, and it's still kind of hard for me.
I want to talk about this really quick, because we do in the Enneagram, this has helped me so much to understand there's 3 numbers in the head, there's 3 numbers in the body, and then there's 3 numbers in the heart. And so some people, when they're faced, when something won't let them move forward, it might not be the body. It might be the heart that is going to be like sending up flashing lights on their dashboard, you know? And I just think that's so beautiful. Like some of my clients, like they just go into a severe depression. That's the heart triad. That's how they're going to feel that. It's not so much the body, but it is a crippling feeling. Or if you're in the head triad, and it can manifest there with just like obsessive thoughts or, you know, crippling thoughts of anxiety or fear, or who knows what. And so I just think it's really beautiful that your body came alongside and really sent up those flashing signals for you.
Yeah.
Love that.
And what began as feeling like a total disconnect, like I'm telling myself, just hold her right there.
Mm.
Just do that. And my body's like, I cannot. I can't. I cannot do it. And that shame, like I couldn't share that with most people, because it's just like, oh, you can do it. This is what this child needs. Or, the the fear that I felt, maybe they wouldn't have said that of, how could you not, how could you not hug your child? And I couldn't. And so I remember a meeting with our social worker, trying to like delicately convey that I wasn't doing okay without feeling like I was jeopardizing our position to be considered as the parents to adopt her. And she was like, you should do something for yourself. Maybe you should go get a manicure. And I just like broke down into ugly crying. And she was like, or maybe we could get you into therapy. And I was like, yes.
Need more than a manicure here.
I appreciate starting small, but yes. And so I did. I began therapy, and I was like, I really needed this years ago. I needed this years ago.
Girl, don't we all?
Yes. And I just want to tell everybody now. And as a mother, as a woman, I think we are just familiar with and fed these stereotypes that to be a woman and to be a mother is to be selfless, meaning that you put others first at whatever cost. Everyone else is sitting down with hot food, and I don't sit down until my food is cold and my coffee's cold and my hair is not done, and that's just the role that we have. And so in this regard, I was telling myself, like, just keep going, it's good. This is a hard time, but it's okay. It's going to be, it's going to be hard for you now, but it's going to be all right later. And I realized, how can I model to my kids that when they are dealing with their own trauma and difficulties, they don't have to just strive harder and think positively. They can acknowledge, like I did, I feel a disconnect in our relationship, and I think I need help. And so I finally told myself, like, this is modeling to them by me going to therapy, and they knew that I was going to therapy, and they're young, but I hope that that gives them a path forward in their own life to know that they, you can't offer somebody healing that you haven't offered yourself. So really,
as a life coach, I often use this, exactly what you're talking about, what women in our culture are expected to be. I try to use it as a way to help empower them to get help, because I don't really believe this, but it works. And so a lot of times, like if we're trying to work on codependency, setting boundaries, I'll just be like, do it for your daughters. You know what I mean? Because if you don't do it, how will they know how to do it? And so it's like amazing how motivating it can be for women to do it for their kids instead of giving them the excuse to do it for themselves, which is my dream. But it's okay. We can go through the back door if we need to.
Yeah. And, I don't know if there was like one major takeaway from my time in therapy, but I started, as a 7, not just looking for, how am I building resilience through this struggle? How am I learning a lesson? How am I improving as a parent or as an individual? It like took away the goal of suffering from whatever improvement there would be, and just being in it. And I said I was trying to find people who had experiences. I started reading even more adoption books during this time, and I read The Body Keeps the Score, and just trying to get knowledge. And it's difficult to find somebody with exactly the same thing who knows exactly what you're feeling. And I just became really comfortable with God is the one who knows me intimately and knows all these intricacies, and I don't feel shame admitting these really just embarrassing things and difficult things that I should have already dealt with, and it shouldn't be that hard for me. And this Emmanuel, God with us, not it's not this God inflicting trauma and suffering in order to help you grow. It was just God who was with me in suffering. And in this time, I also began to feel a lot more comfortable with this idea of God being like a mother, because I was thinking so much about like my own attachment with my child and what had happened to me from caring for these kids that didn't stay. And so I was reading things in the Bible. You know, we're familiar with God as our Heavenly Father. But there are descriptions of God's like mothering love and comfort. So I want to share some of them with you. One is in Hosea, and it says, he was to them like a woman who lifts infants to their cheeks. And I bent down to them and fed them. You know, like this poetic picture of that exact thing that I was struggling to do with my child. There's this description of God doing that with us. And or in Isaiah 49, there's a verse that says, you know, can a woman forget the child from her womb? And it was like, even though they forget, I will not forget you. And it's like God has not forgotten me, and I have not forgotten all these different kids that I have loved so deeply. And I know that feeling like you are not in my forever family, but I think of you when I drive around town and see different places. On certain days in the calendar, I remember that date because it has significance. And feeling like this is God's love for us, you know, that how can you forget? As a mother caring for that child, you wouldn't forget. That's God's love for us. You would not forget. And it just was really different. That was not something that I had grown up with in my faith tradition, to think of God in these ways.
What's really beautiful about that, I did a 1-year internship working with women in recovery. And many of my female clients had lost children to CPS, or if you're not from California.
Yeah. Child Protective Services.
Oh, it's not California. Yeah. Child Protective Services. So I guess it's called CPS. Anyway, and they don't forget either.
No.
And the grief is so overwhelming that it really traps so many women in addiction because the grief is too big. So when they try to take it on, it's like a tsunami. So yes, it's just beautiful to think with these children. Just there's so many women. Oh my gosh, so many women carrying like love for them. Yes. It's really beautiful.
And it made me realize it's so important to hear women talk about God's love in this way, and not and preach about God's love, not just as like conquering and overcoming, but this like God who just holds us close to his cheek. And I think men and women both would benefit from hearing that perspective of women and what we do experience in our body in caring for kids in various ways. And just to compare that to the image of God that we often get when people are trying to comfort, you know, so people, and the way that we try to comfort ourselves with all these cliches and platitudes and things that we think make people feel better, that really minimize God's love. And I just cannot find myself in awe of a God who inflicts trauma on purpose to grow your character, you know? And I think people take these little half-truths out of scripture to apply them to try to cheer people up, and they just become not true. Like, I'm sure you have heard all kinds of things too. Like, I could ramble off the things that I've heard, like everything happens for a reason.
Oh yeah.
I was told after I had a miscarriage, and that just did not make me feel better, and it's not true.
Yes.
Or, you're talking about women who have had children be removed from them from CPS. When I'm feeling my pain and someone says to me, like, well, God works everything for good. It's like, you're saying that to me, but there's also the pain of this child who it has been removed from their biological family or is returning to a situation that's safe enough, but not great. Yeah. It's hard, or the one that isn't even in the Bible, God will never give you more than you can handle. That one's just not even true. That one's not even, but we try to find these positive statements that we think are going to make it better, and we oversimplify them, and we would do much better to just mourn with people who are mourning,
which we are told to do.
We are told to do
by
that,
Jesus
but we
himself.
just want to be positive. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
So I think my experience with foster care and adoption has just revealed this longing for something deeper and better and more true of God when you're in pain, because I had not experienced a lot of pain, and definitely not so intimately in my life prior to that.
Not experience it or not allow yourself? Like, did you
certainly didn't allow myself.
Okay.
But no, I did not have. I just did not face a lot of difficult things in my life before that. Just
I always think
privileged.
That everyone's going to get a wilderness time, and some of us had it growing up, and some of us have it over and over again. And so yeah, you went through wilderness time.
Yeah, this was it. And it has helped me to turn from this theology of a God who cannot be present with sin, and salvation is this punishment for bad things that you've done, and instead turning to a God who came to suffer with us. And salvation is this victory over sin and death, and a promise of a new creation, and a new heaven and a new earth where there's no more sin and death, and he will wipe every tear from our eyes, and there will be no more need for adoption, because there won't be generations and generations of trauma and pain in families where a family needs to come in and adopt. There will just be justice and righteousness. And I think of all these descriptions of the new creation. And C.S. Lewis says, when you find yourself longing for something that this world can't satisfy, I think it says, then that shows that we're made for another world.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've redirected as a 7, my hope in, good things ahead, or instead of just finding the lesson or the way that I can grow from this, my hope is now just in that promise in Christ of a new creation where that people will neither harm nor destroy each other, and the lion and the lamb, will lay down together, and this new picture where we don't have that kind of suffering and pain.
So it's interesting. I would love to hear just brief how you grew up, because I grew up Irish Catholic and Catholic school and everything. And it's so interesting to me because in the Irish Catholic world, in my experience, people don't minimize. It's like, I think the Irish part of it, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, is like when you go through hard things, people are like, oh yeah, life is the worst.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I left the Catholic Church and started going to Christian churches that everyone was trying to reframe my life and tell me like this, the throwing the Bible verses around, like to minimize. So I would just be curious, because I don't think everyone grew up with that messaging. Well, especially if you didn't grow up, in the church at all.
Yeah.
But even like, not every Christian, not every Catholic, not everyone. So would you just tell us like a brief little bit about, I don't know, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I think that's very representative of American evangelicalism. And
Yeah.
that's where I had my home and my upbringing.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think it's really individualistic. I think that's the main thing, is this idol of self-improvement.
Mm.
And, when you have something that's hard, it's like your individual struggle. And I
Mm.
think I always felt that it was prayer and faith and just, hang on to Jesus and it'll
Yeah.
be okay. And there wasn't a lot of exploration of like my emotions or a need for professional help.
Yeah.
Um, and when it's just your individual problem, you can kind of have that triumphant feeling like I'm going to overcome this.
Mm.
And I definitely have that, I'm going to have a story about this will be my testimony of how I had this hard thing. And then I have a nice bow at the end of it. But if we approach our faith as something collective, my pain is tied to someone else's.
Yeah.
Or my the good things that I have might come at someone else's expense.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we have to see the bigger picture that we are contributing to and that we're a part of, and be able to acknowledge, the joy of me adopting a child comes at someone's great sorrow and loss of their child. And I don't want it to just be, see, God worked good things for you, but there's immense loss also. And so I have just expanded my reach to be able to include both of those things at the same time.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that is my story. And we now have 2 kids and walking through the grief and building attachment and acknowledging those things in my body. I have really been awakened to mindfulness also. It's like that trauma in my body just ignited this again, which many people may already have, but I did not.
Yeah.
Just awareness of what I'm feeling. Like I remember shortly after that, it's like, oh, I think my lymph nodes are inflamed. Boy, I've never paid attention to that before. I can feel that, and I started doing yoga and using my breath and just feeling how good that felt to be aware of what I'm feeling in my body. And even just having good conversation with friends, like, oh, I just feel like a connection with you in my body. It's not just chills on my arms or something, but I just was walking through the world now aware of myself. And that has been so fun and difficult too. But it's like, this is what people are talking about when they're describing mindfulness. And I want to offer that to my kids too, not just perfect obedience to me and rule following. I want them to know themselves and to feel what they're feeling in their body also. Yeah.
That's interesting. So I went through a phase where both of my parents had cancer at the same time and they're divorced. And so I had to like visit this one with cancer. And then I guess that ended up being, at least they had a healthy spouse to take care of them. But that really opened up my heart center for the first time. And I am a body type, like 130%, everything is my body. And to this day, I don't spend any time in my thoughts, very minimal. But that was so interesting because I would have, and I'd already been through therapy. So I was aware that it was healthy to cry. And like, if I wasn't crying about both my parents having cancer, stage 3, both, like very serious, scary. My mom almost died from the chemo, was in ICU.
Yeah.
But I would just like keep going and just like, the way it manifested was like a loss of appetite and just body. But then I would be like, gosh, I sure do feel like I might need to cry.
How can I do that?
So then I would be like, okay. And so anyway, luckily my therapist had taught me how to get into my heart center. For me, is watching movies where dogs die.
That'll get you every time.
Every time, open up the floodgates. And so anyway, so I have these like things I can do to like make myself cry. And then I would just I have a chair here in my bedroom, and it just became my crying chair. And so I would literally like sit there and just think about sad things, or, watch a movie for 10 minutes about a dog dying or whatever. And then I would just sob.
Once it came out, then it could.
Yes. And then, because I think, so if you're head center and I'm body center, I think what we are afraid of is that if we get into our heart or the other centers, it'll like destroy us. I don't know if you had that feeling. I've always really felt that if I empowered my feelings from my heart, they would totally knock me over and kill me. So, but just to sit and sob for 20 minutes and be like, okay, that felt good. And then move on with the day is just, I don't know. It's beautiful when we do get the opportunities to know that what we've always done isn't enough anymore.
Yeah.
And to find a way to go somewhere else. I think that's really beautiful.
And not only rely on these same tools that may have served you, but are not serving you in the current season.
And that's what I love about the Enneagram. People resist any kind of personality, anything, because they don't want to be put in a box. But I heard it said, and I think it's true, the Enneagram shows you the box you're already in. That's it. Like, you're in a box. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to, oh my goodness, look how perfect that timing was.
Good timing.
Julie, do you have anything else you want to say that's on your radar?
I kind of, like I said at the beginning, I think no matter what type of struggle it is, or what type of coping mechanism you have for your own struggles, it doesn't have to be the same as someone else. Or if you have something that you're grieving, it doesn't have to be the grief Olympics where someone has had a similar amount of grief in order to empathize with you, or you can't share it if your pain is not as bad as someone else's. I think really getting it out and showing vulnerability with one another brings so much healing for the speaker and the listener. You're able to humanize somebody. And even if you're saying, I don't have a problem feeling things in my body, but I have a hard time feeling, and just knowing that we face things differently, and takes away that fear of like, I'm too much. It's too much for me to share this story with people because they don't know how to take it, because that's not their life experience. It's really important to not isolate and share your pain with a safe person. So I appreciate being able to just verbalize it, and I've done it, and I have people that I've spoken it to, but even more and more, it's like, this does not have power over me, and I'm not stuck. I don't have to be stuck in it. So
I think that's really beautiful. I am somebody, and I'm getting the sense that you might be too, where we're more comfortable sharing vulnerable things than other people. I will say I have had to also give other people the grace to realize not everyone can take it. So when they give me a minimizing response, or whatever people will do with their defense mechanisms,
right,
to be like, okay, this was not the person, but how will you know? And then to give yourself the grace to be like, but how would I know who the right people are? The only way you can find out is by trying. And that not everyone will hold you and your story.
Yep.
And that says more about them than about us, and that's okay. Like, you're a 7, and before you went through this, you might not have been someone who was like amazing at holding people's stories. Like, right, the reframe, the 7 reframe.
Yeah,
it's awesome. I just want to say thank you so much. And I want to share a little bit of a story, which I'm super paraphrasing, but I just heard it not too long ago on my favorite Enneagram podcast, Typology. Do you listen to that one?
I do.
With Ian Cron. And I just loved, I don't know if you heard the story, but actually, you know what? I don't even, it might have been on a different podcast where he was being interviewed. I can't remember now because I'm in perimenopause. I don't remember anything. But anyway, he said it, and he was talking about this guy who was he studied world religions his entire career. And he was like the expert on, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, all the faiths. And so he got really, really old, and somebody interviewed him, and they were like, "What do you want to tell us about God? Like, what have you learned by studying every single religion and everything?" And he answered, "We're in good hands." And I just was like, that is true. So thank you for sharing your story and for sharing how God has worked through your story in your life. And thank you for being our first one, because, this is a fun. I just want everyone to know that Julie has a very adventurous spirit, because I was sending her texts like, I'm not going to be able to edit. And then, oh, yeah, I can't edit and whatever. So thank you for being patient with me.
Of course.
That you have a very blessed week.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in to the channel. And I'm not sure if we're going to be here every week, because a lot of people are telling me no about sharing their stories, which is fine. So if you would like to share your story, please feel free to reach out to me, Sarah at sarahAbbottLifeCoaching.com. But otherwise, the minute I find more people, I will be posting their wonderful stories. So thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You guys take care. Bye-bye.